Before we start, if you're enjoying this podcast and you can see it adding value to you and the Australian screen industry, we have a small favour to ask.
Please subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review. Tell your fellow cast and crew, and in return, we promise to work as hard as we can to make this podcast as valuable to you as possible. Welcome to We Interrupt This Broadcast. It's your monthly roundup of everything that's happening in the Australian screen industry. I'm Julie Eckersley.
And I'm Kirsty Stark. And between us, we've been involved in hundreds of hours of screen stories, myself as a crew member and producer.
And me as a commissioner, producer and actress. We're here to bring the industry together, spark a conversation and keep you up to date.
So make sure to subscribe and follow us at We Interrupt Podcast on Instagram to join our weekly conversation.
Let's get into it. Hi, Kirsty. Welcome to August.
Yeah, we've been busy. We've barely spoken this month because we've each had so much going on.
Absolutely. You've been launching your show first day around the globe, and I've been in production on a feature.
How's it going so far?
Going well. We're shooting nights, so, I do have toothpicks keeping my eyes open, but it's fantastic to be back in production. How about first day? What's the reception been?
We've had such an incredible response. It's so nice to have that direct connection to audience again, like I did back in my web series days.
Yeah, well, isn't that lovely? That's one of the great benefits of the new media era, that you really are close to audience, for better and worse, right? Because, maybe it's not so easy to blame the marketing team if your show doesn't do well.
Yes, when you are the marketing team. And that has been a huge part of the journey. The buck stops with you, and on YouTube you can see exactly how many people have watched that show and everyone else can see it as well. So, yeah, you've got to create that momentum and make it happen yourself.
It's a brave new world. Hey, some interesting things going on. Obviously, there was the Future Visions Summit, which was a massive event, really looking at a part of our industry in terms of high-end drama. How do we do that good to great? How do we do the best of the best?
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it over to Melbourne, but that is a part of the industry that is really thriving at the moment. Here in Australia, we're delivering great content that is having international success, and to be able to have those conversations and compare them to all of the incredible guests that they brought in from overseas. People got a lot out of it from what I heard.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't able to make Future Visions either because I was in production. But I think one of the things I'm really excited to see is, what is the long-term impact? When we're bringing in some of the best creators in the world, we're having discussions with them. I think we'll see a flow-on effect.
And I think sometimes in Australia we feel like we're the small player and we don't necessarily fit in with the rest of the world. And when you're in the room having conversations with people and you see that they're just normal people who have the same challenges with production that you have, it really helps to reset the playing field and make you think like you can do anything on that scale.
One of the things I loved about Future Visions last year in 2024 was hearing the creator of Beef talking. He was so generous with what he said. And I think it was, from memory, Beef was his 13th pilot that got made. So he'd actually pitched, got 13 shows up, and it was the 13th time. And I guess what that reminded me about was persistence. Persistence is just part of this industry, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about the Logies. Can I just say, I really love women in suits on red carpets. That's really having a moment, and I'm applauding it.
Yeah, so glam. So the Logies are interesting because they have changed their voting structure over the last couple of years. And there used to be 2 categories: most popular, which was voted by the public, and then most outstanding, which was done through a panel of judges. They've now combined that.
So they're bringing together popular opinion plus audience numbers, as well as professional industry opinion. So those 3 things are now informing who the winner is on the night. And Fisk. Totally cleaned up. Go Fisk.
And that just goes to show, when you have audience numbers, then people are fans of the show as well, and they're probably likely to go that next step and vote for you.
With looking at all of our awards, I think one of the things I'm interested in thinking about is how we're going to adjust to the new media landscape, and how do we continue to expand as viewers expand. So obviously we've got the television space, and that's changing. The streaming space now very much in play. And then, as all those other platforms, as YouTube becomes more and more popular, which we all understand is inevitable now, how will institutions like the Logies expand to include them?
Yeah, you're right. That is so interesting because audience are shifting away from traditional television. That means that the less people are watching, the more insular the awards ceremonies become because they're about a more specific subset of the population compared to everybody. So if the audience is on streaming platforms, if the audience is watching creators on social media, how do we shift that understanding of what our industry is, or do we even go down that pathway? I think the actors are doing it really well, actually.
Absolutely. Yeah, they've got a digital category and they're also doing some really innovative thinking in terms of how they bring that in moving forward. And I think one of the things that's really important to us in terms of an industry is starting to see ourselves as broader than just film and television. How do we make sure that those of us who've come through legacy or traditional media are making space for new generations, new platforms? Because at the end of the day, as in our interview with Jen Topping, as Jen said, it's all audiovisual storytelling. Like, that is actually the medium that we're in. And now it's happening in a whole lot of new ways, but essentially it is all the screen industry. And surely it's important that we start to see ourselves as one.
Yeah, and by accounting the screen industry as only traditional film and television, we're disregarding and shutting out a whole new generation of creators who are building content.
And a whole new generation of audience.
Mm.
And I've certainly heard whispers from the actors that they are looking for new opportunities in that space moving forward, which is really exciting.
Yeah, while we're on the topic of awards ceremonies and audience participation, did you listen to the hottest 100 Australian songs of all time on Triple J?
Wasn't it an incredible countdown? You know, we're saying with this new media landscape, there's not many water cooler moments, but I really do think that something about that Triple J Hottest 100 had a water cooler moment for Australia. In fact, over 2.5 million Australians voted in it. Isn't that extraordinary?
A tenth of the population coming together to have an opinion on essentially Australian culture and what that means.
And without knowing the demographics, I would suspect that would be across the board, because the songs that were chosen, you know, really some great classic hits from a while back, but, you know, a pretty broad spectrum of songs as well.
Yeah, obviously Never Tear Us Apart was the top song, but there was everything in the top 10 from the Veronicas to Hilltop Hoods, real range of genres. What I did see, though, that relates this back to the film industry is a post from Rory Elkington on LinkedIn about what it would mean to have a hottest 100 Australian films of all time.
Oh, I love that. I love that idea.
Me too. I saw that conversation come up. Ivan from Actor jumped on it and said it would be something they might be interested in getting involved in. So I hope that conversation is happening in the background because, you know, we're always talking about how to reach audiences, how to create conversation about our films. It's not the same as a 3-minute song, but there would be so many films across generations that people love and adore.
My heart is always with The Castle, I just have to say. The first time I saw The Castle, I'd been living overseas for nearly a year, and I was coming back on a Qantas flight, and it was in the days where there was a film on and that was it. There was none of this sort of personalised viewing, and The Castle came off. I had no idea about it, and I absolutely just thought, I love this crazy country I'm flying back to.
We quote it all the time in my extended family still after all these years. So yeah, that would definitely be in my top 1 or 2 films.
So an interesting move by the government in recent days, saying that they're going to include YouTube in the under 16 ban for social media. Now, we're both mums. So as mum of a young person, what do you think about the social media ban and what do you think about adding YouTube in there?
From what I can understand, it will just mean that you can still access content without being logged in, but under 16s can't sign up for an account, which means they can't comment, they can't create their own content, which I think is a real loss. And I'm curious as to whether the algorithm will still actually be able to target people based on what they watch, even if they're logged out. So I'm not sure if it's really going to have the effect that they think it will.
So one of the things I do understand about the algorithm is that it can tell who's watching on different platforms. So say on the television in your house where you've got YouTube, it's always kind of, you know, sports documentaries or that kind of content. It'll know that that's a person watching. And if there is also an iPad that has YouTube on it and it's always watching Cocomelon, it can also, even if it's the one login, on platforms it can differentiate. And I think you're right. Like, I feel really mixed about it because on one level I'm really relieved as a mum. I don't want my daughter exposed to social media. I think that, you know, it's clear that there are negative effects and exposure, and it can't be controlled the way that it did when we had the television rating system. That's 100% true. But then you look at examples like the McFarlane brothers that we spoke to. If they hadn't been able to come up on YouTube and sharpen their craft that way, what opportunities would they have missed out on? Firstly, to talk to Australian kids, to be part of that audience, and secondly, to increasingly contribute to our industry because they've got such craft skills that they've developed on YouTube.
I think that is a real problem. Where are the pathways for emerging creators if they can't create for online?
And does it become whack-a-mole? Does it mean that platforms like Roblox become the new place that kids go to hang out and develop? And then has the government got themselves into a situation where they're just going to have to increasingly shut down other platforms? I think the essence of the takeaway here is it's really complicated. Like, there are absolutely good things that are trying to be done here and good outcomes, but, it's going to be messy, right?
Yeah, and I think putting a blanket rule on anything has problems. A couple of things I think are really interesting. One is I have a 4-year-old, so he's not quite at the point of engaging and navigating with his own content choices yet. He definitely is, but within the limited boundaries I've set for him. And on YouTube, that means I have set up a child account where he has 4 specific channels that he can watch. Having an account actually makes that space safer for him than it would be if he didn't have one. And I think the other thing that's interesting looking forward into the teenage years is part of the reason that kids are navigating to these spaces where they have social connection is because they don't have the freedom of those parent-free spaces anywhere in their real lives. More and more people are in organised activities. They are, taken from one place to another and supervised. And I read a really interesting article in The Atlantic the other day where they asked kids, do you want to be on social media? Would you use social media less if you had the choice, and what would it take in order to make that happen? And they all said that they wanted spaces that were not supervised by adults, where they could just go out and have their own conversations where they felt like they had freedom, which I think is so fascinating.
So fascinating. We should put a link to that article in the show notes. So you're sort of saying helicopter parenting in a way is driving kids to want to be on social media because they're trying to find places to be where they can explore who they are.
Yeah, without that parental oversight.
So a bit of an AI update. Obviously, this is very live and ongoing. I noticed that there was an interim report from the Productivity Commission looking at whether AI is going to impact on Australian IP. So it's great that those conversations are happening. But at the same time, we had Netflix coming out saying that they were now using AI to cut costs in their postpath.
The writing on the wall has been there for this one the whole time. It was just whether the legal system could make it possible. And it looks like Netflix has taken a stance where they're happy for producers, at least in this particular case, to use generative AI in order to save budget on a scene or a shot that would have otherwise been very, very expensive.
I don't think that it means that the IP conversation is over, though, because we know from the court cases and from, again, the Australian government that they are continuing to understand that that is an issue and that Australian IP is worth a lot of money. And if that gets taken and used for, a company that's not Australian, that is a disadvantage. So there's some interesting conversations happening there. And I guess it's just step by step. Again, it's another complicated issue, right?
Yeah, and again, the guilds, especially Claire Pullen at the Writers Guild, has really been on the front foot about this, and it's fantastic to keep pushing for the outcomes that are going to protect our Australian creatives. Also on the AI front, Amazon has invested in a company called Fable, which they're calling the Netflix of AI. Essentially what Fable does is take existing IP but open it up so that users can generate their own content within that story world. So one of the first releases is a South Park-esque animated series, and users can create avatars of their friends and family, create their own story. They're essentially saying you can become the showrunner of your own episodes within this story world that's created. So that, I think, is fascinating and a really interesting look at where the future could go in terms of personalized content.
That reminds me of a comment you made a few months ago, Kirsty, saying if you want to tell your kid a bedtime story and you want it to be about them and they particularly like, whatever dragons, and you want to put some personalization in it. I mean, that's a platform that could do that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The key to it is that the original content creators still maintain the IP and the copyright in the story world. But I think there will be avenues for individual creators to make revenue off of the additional content that they then create.
So let's talk about some other industry news, more musical chairs. Managing Director James Taylor has announced that he is leaving SBS. This is massive news. He's been there for 13 years. You know, we can often feel that those roles are far away from our industry, but leadership's important. And so it'll be really interesting to see who takes up that role. Other news, I've heard a bit of gossip.
Yeah, tell me the gossip.
Well, I've heard that the new Netflix role for content is getting close, that there's serious interviews happening. And, I was so relieved to hear that because I think we all just were like, a little niggle. Is this role going to be filled?
Because we've been talking about this role for a couple of months now, and it was getting to the point where we were starting to question, is Netflix actually going to replace Q and have a presence that means something in Australia, or are they waiting to hear the outcome of streaming quotas or holding off on the future of local content altogether?
Yeah, so excitingly, that is not the case. Watch this space. Maybe we'll have something more to talk about next month.
Yeah, and I think both at Netflix and SBS, it will be interesting to see how much impact that has on the industry and people pitching in. Often things can really go on pause while the new people come in and set the direction that they want to take the company. So hopefully there's not too much disruption with those changes.
For those of you who haven't yet got your head around the new Screen Australia guidelines, Kristen Hodges has done an amazing summary for us all. That's been published in If magazine, and I think you can also find it on her LinkedIn page. So this is so great. I mean, thank you, Kristen. It's a 3-part series, and it really clearly breaks down what the changes are, what they mean to you. It's got images as well as really clear overviews, and we're going to put links to it in our show notes because it's super helpful.
Yeah, for busy producers trying to navigate those changes, it is just such a time saver. So thank you very much, Kristen. We all appreciate it. So I've noticed a bit of a short film renaissance in the last couple of months, Julie, while we've been having this very conversation. Just in the last couple of weeks, we've had Screen Queensland announced their short film fund, so up to $50,000 for 5 to 15-minute films. At the same time, Screen New South Wales short to feature fast track initiative is back, so proof of concept films for up to $75,000. And Actor Pitch Focus also has their call for entries open, and that deadline has been extended to 1st of September for anyone looking to enter that initiative.
Great to see lots of opportunities opening up. And while we're on opportunities, SPA applications are now open for the ones to watch. That closes on Wednesday, the 27th of August. And I also saw that SPA has Pitch on Demand coming up. So again, we'll put links in the show notes. Great opportunities to get your work out there, to meet really impressive people and to have powerful conversations.
And lastly, in news, we must acknowledge and remember screen industry legend David Stratton, who contributed so much to Australian film, both as a critic and as a supporter of emerging talent in his role as director of the Sydney Film Festival. Rest in peace, David. What are you watching this month, Julie?
Well, we're in the middle of MIF here in Melbourne. That runs through to the 24th of August, so lots of fantastic films to see.
Yeah, and speaking of feature films, I think it's really great to see the strong launch that Together had, both here and over in the US. Number 6 here in Australia on opening weekend, and I believe they took 10 million in their first weekend in the US, which is great.
And last numbers I heard, that was now over 17 million globally.
Fantastic.
Have you been watching anything else?
One thing really interesting that I came across online was YouTuber Ryan Trahan's 50 States in 50 Days challenge that he set himself on YouTube.
Yeah, I heard Colin and Samir talking about it. It was really impressive what he achieved, wasn't it?
He's had a YouTube presence for multiple years now, and he's been building this audience, but it's come together in this huge, phenomenon, I guess you would call it. He and his wife traveled to 50 states in 50 days. They filmed and uploaded a video every day. They had a couple of editors working behind the scenes to make that possible, but they did it as a fundraiser and ended up raising over $9 million US for St. Jude's.
Wow.
It reminds me of the old telethons, but for someone as an individual, essentially, to be able to achieve that level of attention and money behind it is just incredible.
Absolutely incredible. Wow, there's so many new models coming through, isn't there?
I know. It just goes to show that if you have that attention and that trust, that can convert to money and can convert to business models. He's obviously a unicorn, but I think it does give hope to the rest of us who are kind of dabbling in the area and looking at how can this play out financially and be viable, that, it is possible.
This has come to my attention recently that as we're all starting to kind of learn to speak the language of YouTube, that there's a real difference between the amount of subscribers or followers you have and how engaged they are. That learning to read both of those metrics and understand engagement as well as followers is really important to understanding the impact that someone can really have. So obviously someone like Ryan, he's got all those followers, but also they were really engaged, and that translated to him actually being able to get them to donate money to a cause. Amazing.
They're not just watching, they're going a step further. And I think that really is the key to those business models. I mean, we were really thrilled. We managed to monetize our YouTube channel. We're a few days after that monetization, and, we've made $10 so far, a whole $10. So
it's $10 you didn't have last week, Kirsty.
True. But it's obviously not sustainable to just rely on clicks and views. You need to turn that into something bigger. And I think that's the big lesson to take away from this.
Absolutely. It comes back to that model we've been talking about of revenue stacking, going what are the opportunities to have a business element to the content that you're creating so that you can make it sustainable.
And speaking of engaged audiences, we've got an episode coming out in a couple of weeks with Sam Jockle from Seen the Film. Just really incredible to hear about her experience of distribution as someone who has come from a more entrepreneurial background outside of the film industry, and see how she approached things.
Kirsty, what's in production around the country?
Well, you're in production, but your production...
It's a secret!
Your production is yet to be announced, so we'll have to spill the beans on that one next month. But the big one is Mosquito Bowl, which is filming up in Queensland, a big Netflix feature film directed by Peter Berg from Friday Night Lights. My Brilliant Career, also for Netflix, continues in SA. I think they're getting pretty close to wrapping up now. And it's great to see some regional production. So the feature Forever Young is shooting in the Hawkesbury area of New South Wales. And speaking of regional, Screenworks has put together a fantastic production list. It covers TV and features in pre and production across the country. And it's designed to keep their members in the loop, which is so wonderful when it can be really hard to find that information about what's coming up and where the jobs are.
Absolutely.
Anyway, we better let you go, Julie. You've got another night shoot tonight, so back to production.
Put the eye drops in, take the caffeine, and I'm ready to go.
Have fun. I did get very jealous when you posted that picture of the trucks at dawn on the first day. I missed that on-set environment so much.
I know, that first day of shooting, that first clap, it's a real thrill, isn't it?
It is. Have a great month, and we will see you in September.
Have a great month.
Now back to your regular programming.
We Interrupt This broadcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation and the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we acknowledge them as the traditional custodians and first storytellers of these regions. Always was, always will be.